This video is made possible thanks to Cyclops Joe. Well, hello and welcome once again. Today we're taking a look at the ARKEN Gen 2 SH-4 6-24x50. This was kindly sent in by YouTuber Cyclops Joe. If you don't know who he is, he's another reviewer just like me, but with a much larger personality. He's a tremendous guy, and link in the description below to his channel. And with that, let's continue on with this review. You're taking a look at the VPR reticle. This is in mil and illuminated. It doesn't seem too small at 6x, which is nice. More often than not, at lower magnifications on FFP scopes, the reticle gets way too small at the lower magnification. I'm happy to report here it still seems very usable. If it seems like it's slightly off-center as far as elevation goes, you'd be correct, because the elevation was cranked completely up on this when I filmed this, and I didn't realize that. Now, it does look off, but behind it, it's not too bad. There are all your subtensions, and I have to say the scope makes really good use of negative space. I like this fact that it has a very fine center dot, and the crosshair around it still has the subtensions on it with a little bit of space in between to allow you to look at your target. Illumination is not that impressive, but for the price, you have to factor that in. This is a $400 to $450 scope when you can buy it when it's in stock. Right now, these things are going used for $700 or $800, and by the end of this video, you'll completely understand why. The illumination might not seem that great, but that's probably the biggest weakness of this scope, and it's still quite usable if you're in darker environments. Let's take a look and see how these turrets fare. These turrets are amongst the best I've ever felt at any price point, let alone $450. Absolutely perfect. Let's see if it tracks as good as it sounds. The reticle lines up basically perfectly as you see. Windage is perfect, elevation is just, again, that half a click in either direction. Illumination is on maximum. That is the most you could expect out of this reticle as far as illumination goes. So it looks like on the windage, we're about 0.1 of a mil off at 3 mils to the right. Nope. Resets to 0 pretty good. Our elevation is probably about 0.05 of a mil up farther than where it was. 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So across 8 mils, we are 0.1, 2 mils off at 8 mils up. See how I reset that back to 0. Resets to 0, good. But across 8 mils of elevation, we're off by about 0.2 of a mil. So let's try this one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then we're 1, 2. So it isn't perfect, but it's really close. How close? It's only 3% off. Now, I'd be hard pressed to even range properly at a distance needed to actually dial up that much. So all things considered, that's pretty damn good. From there, let's take a look at a 30-yard power transformer at our minimum magnification of 6x. Illumination is off and the parallax is not properly set. So we're going to take it from 6 to 24x. And note, again here, I didn't really mention it earlier, but there is 0 eye box shift, which is fantastic. We get it focused as much as we can, and we also turn the illumination on. Illumination, you can't really tell is on. There's a slight discoloration to it, but that's about it. As far as the image quality, it's not terrible. There's a little bit of chromatic aberration you can see coming up on the shadows of the top of the box, and everything has a slight softness to it, I'll say. It's not ever super razor sharp. But again, this is $450 we're talking about. We're not talking about a $2,000 optic that doesn't perform like one. We're talking about a $450 optic that performs at that level, if not a little bit more. From 30 to about 400 yards, we focus our attention on this brick building. We once again go from minimum to maximum magnification with the parallax turned all the way back, just so you can see it get finely dialed in. It is a beautiful bright sunny day, so there's no real shadows to see if anything will be washed out or not. Anyway, we fine-tuned the focus knob and you can clearly count every single brick on that building. That's pretty damn impressive. Granted, again, it's not the sharpest image, but there's still plenty of detail to know exactly what you're looking at. But see, if you back out the magnification a little bit, might that sharpen up the image? Well, we do exactly that, bumping it back to about 18 to 20x, and yes, the image does look sharper and the contrast does look better. This is a fantastic performance at any price, let alone its price. And there I go again talking about the price. Everything is relative. This is $450. This is not a $2,000 Razor HD. I'm not expecting this to be at that level, but if it can perform really well for its price, that's fantastic. Bumping it up even further to 1,000 yards in our longest distance of all of my videos, we're going to see how well this thing looks at maximum magnification. As you can see, the illumination is on here and we are in direct sunlight, so the image might not look ideal, if not a little bit dark. Getting the parallax on this is a breeze. The knob itself feels perfectly damped and it has plenty of fine tuning to it. If there's one thing ARKEN did perfectly, it's all the controls. Everything on here feels absolutely top notch. We backed it out again to about 18x to see, number one, if there's any image improvements, and number two, so this way we can easier see what's going on when we add about 10 mils of elevation. So the reason why I do this is because that's a rough idea of how much you'd have to come up at that distance for some calibers. The scope might look good with no added elevation, but if you're adding elevation and you're shooting at that distance, don't you want it to be as good as can be? So this is to see just how well it would look at those distances. And with 10 mils of elevation added, to me it looks a little bit more out of focus despite my attempts at making it as good as possible with the parallax. So there is some shortcomings with it, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not terrible. If you're shooting at a larger target, like a full-size IPSC target, you'd have no issues with it. Anyway, back to the 400-yard brick building. The reason why we're back here is that it's snowing, very overcast, and a little bit late in the evening. I bumped all the camera settings up so we can have a brighter image, but this is just to see how well this picks up darker shadows at distance in fading light. This is only a 50mm front objective with a 34mm tube, so it's not going to be the absolute be-all, end-all of everything. That would be ideally with a 56mm front objective or larger, but it still lets in a decent amount of light, especially when compared to the outside, which is good. Higher magnifications, it does get a little bit darker, but as we back it out, you can see it gets a little bit brighter and a little bit sharper. Overall, still very good, all things considered. All right, my home away from home, the 50-yard line at my local range. So here we are at 6x, and I have to say I don't particularly care about the lower magnification being 6x. For me and my uses, it's a little bit high. I prefer 5 or less. Despite that, though, it still looks absolutely fantastic. The magnification ring here, we'll bump it up to 24, is frozen stiff because it is about 15 degrees out, and the grease inside with the tolerances that it has solidified to concrete. This is roughly a 5-inch gong at 50 yards, and I really like that you can see a lot of the detail on it. Okay, granted, we are at 24x, it's a very high magnification, but still, you can see every little dimple, every little imperfection on the face of the steel plate. The more information that you can gather from looking through your scope, the better. I didn't realize that someone was shooting these plates, or else I would have gotten on them a little bit faster, but at least on a bright sunny day at 50 yards, you don't ever have to worry about missing any sort of detail on a steel plate or even a paper target like we're about to see right now. In the fading light, the glass gives up a little bit as far as brightness goes at maximum magnification, but here, in direct sunlight basically, it is fantastic. Looking through this thing, you almost need sunglasses. I had to step it down a little bit with the shutter speed on the camera, just so this way we can see the target a little bit more clearly. Despite that though, you can still see a little bit of chromatic aberration coming in around the bullseye, around the top half of the hemisphere or so. But you can count every single one of those 22 LR holes in the black. That is not easy to do on a lot of different scopes. My Razor HD 3 to 18, it's really difficult to do, but with this, no problem. So on to the eye box, and this is one of the areas where the scope sort of has a bit of a hard time. Here at 6x, you can see it's not that stellar, but if we were using this in LPVO, you'd get a very similar eye box. All that being said though, this should be a little bit bigger than what it is. We bump it up to 12x, and unfortunately, it's a bit more of the same, if not a little bit tighter. It's just the way it is. You're paying $450 for something, something has got to give. Unfortunately with this, I feel it's the eye box. Even more so when we bump it up to its max magnification of 24x, it is extremely tight. But like you've seen throughout this entire video, when you are behind this and you're perfectly set up from 6 to 24x, it does not shift as far as forwards or backwards. You are going to be having a consistent cheek weld, and that is very important, at least to me. So expect that when you're getting behind the scope, something has got to give, and it's the eye box. Moving on to the 200-yard line, we're going to start here at 100 yards and pan ourselves across. I completely forgot to zoom in at a 100-yard paper target during this day, so please forgive me on that. What we do start out with is a piece of steel at roughly 190 yards, and we're going to play around with that for a little bit before painting it over. I love these steel targets for a couple of reasons. One, I get to shoot at them and it's a lot of fun, but two, they're a very low contrast area. They're matching very well to the berm behind them, and to be able to see them with a scope like this and pick up not only where the plate is but all the detail on them is very good to see. We pan over now to the 200-yard paper targets. If we could find them zoomed in at 24x, this is a little challenging. But did you note how good everything else looked? It was fantastic. This being a very bright sunny day, I was expecting to see a little bit more chromatic aberration around that bullseye and on top of that snow. The main reason for that is I was testing a couple other scopes today, or this day, and you did see some chromatic aberration on top of that snow line. Bumping now to 300-yard steel targets, we're going to be shooting out here with 22LR and 223. Take note of the splash underneath the left post right there, and we're going to be shooting the steel plates to the right for the rest of this, except for the last shot. The one thing to note is the horizontal steel tubes that are there. You do see a little bit of chromatic aberration popping up, but that's it. Everything else, despite this being light gray on brown, is very easy to pick up all of those steel plates, and you can see the chain extremely clearly. Overall then, this scope performs extremely well for the price tag that it comes with, $450 when in stock. Unfortunately, these are still back ordered as of early April 2021 for 12 plus weeks, but these are absolutely fantastic. And with that, let's get into my final thoughts. So there you have it. The ARKEN Optics Gen 2 6-24x50 SH-4 model number is honestly surprisingly good. For $400, you're getting an awful lot, and you've seen that throughout this entire video. With the exception of the illumination being a little low, it's still usable for when you would actually need it in twilight hours. It's got surprisingly good glass. It feels extremely well built. Everything works perfectly. These turrets are fantastic. Fantastic. And if you want to check out more on this scope, check out the video of Cyclops Joe's video down in the description below. Do I recommend this? Absolutely. If you're looking to get into a budget optic, this is very well worthwhile. $4 or $450, I think, for this model. They do offer it in a lower magnification of 4 to 16, which in my opinion would be what I'd probably go for in the future. I like the lower magnification of 4 versus 6, especially when you're trying to transition from target to target. And I find 16x to be extremely usable for the style of shooting that I use. And I bet at 16x, on that one, it looks fantastic. This one at 24 gets a little bit dark and a little bit hazy, but it's still an excellent picture, all things considered. So a question I know that you might have with this scope is some of the competitors that are in this rough price point. And the one that comes to mind is the Strike Eagle 5-25. Well, my good friend N that comes to range with me basically every single time that I go has a Strike Eagle 5-25, and I can say this, it's a decent scope, but this is superior. The glass on this is better, the turrets are better, the feel and fit and finish on this thing are at least as good as with the Strike Eagle, if not a little bit better. The only thing with that scope versus this, the guaranteed warranty. I almost forgot to mention weight. How the hell could I do that? 36 ounces for a 6-24, in my opinion, is not that bad. Considering you're probably going to be putting this on a larger, heavier gun anyway to mitigate recoil and or just add to the comfort of the gun, this isn't terrible. Of course, I have to compare it with something, and here's my Gen 1 Razor HD 5-20 with rings coming in at 43 or so ounces. So obviously this is going to be heavier because the rings, the bubble level, but also this is a literal baton. You could literally use this to club someone half to death with it. Another decent comparison that I might have, in case you might be wondering, even though it's not the same magnification range, is the PST Gen 2 3-15. This is significantly lighter, but it is a little bit on the smaller side. 30mm tube as opposed to 34. This is a 44mm tube where the ARKEN is 50, so there is that. And here's one I don't think I have showcased on the channel yet. This is an old Steiner Military 4-16 by 50, the exact magnification range that this one's little brother comes in. And just for the hell of it, as near as makes no difference, the same weight. So all things considered, this ARKEN is not that heavy. There's only one problem with this scope, and that's you can't really buy this right now. They're back ordered for 12 plus weeks, and that's not a guarantee, I don't believe. I've seen these going used secondhand right now for around $700 or $800, and at that price point, why go with this when you can go with other options around that same price point? This is fantastic for its price. If it was $600, I would still recommend it. But beyond that, you're starting to get into some pretty competitive territory, and at that point, you might have better options out there for you. But if you can find this for its standard street price, get it. It gives you a lot of great features, albeit some quirks like the 8 mils per rotation, but it just seems to work. Now, I can't speak about longevity because who knows how long this will last. Will it last 1,000 rounds of 308 or 10,000 rounds of 308? I really don't know. And to be brutally honest, as far as dealing with ARKEN, I haven't really dealt with them. I know Cyclops Joe has, and he stands by them and their products, so thus I have no doubt that this thing would last quite some time. Or if there was a problem, I'm pretty sure ARKEN would step up to the plate and take care of business. So this is a wholehearted recommendation for me. If you could find one, just get it, because it will surprise you in more ways than one. Anyway, a huge thank you to Cyclops Joe for sending this in for review. He sent this to me for free, and I think I'm going to do a giveaway on my Patreon for it because easy come, easy go, and it's only fair that this goes to someone out there that needs it more than I do. That's all for right now. Thank you very much for watching, and see you again next time. And a huge thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. Without you, this wouldn't be possible.